Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present Trevor Bartlett, who has come over here from Portsmouth.
Yes.
To ask everything you'd ever want to know about Quentin Tarantino.
You don't want
but
to
if you, quite a few of these people were here the other night, and they know that I have something to do with this movie theater, but I'm not too sure if even I know what you do when you're not watching Quentin Tarantino movies. Maybe you'd like to explain that.
I'm reading about Quentin Tarantino movies. Well, for years and years, I ran the film series at the Music Hall in Portsmouth. I produced the Telluride by the Sea weekend celebration of cinema. We were not allowed to call it a festival because a festival takes place in more than one place, involves lots of venues, and more than just 6 movies. But I also worked for the Telluride Film Festival in Colorado, which was for real. 8 different venues and 40 movies over 4 days. It was madness. But I was up to my eyeballs in presenting films for years and years and years, and then went on after that to I did some time writing film reviews, which was it was really liberating after writing promotional copy for so many years to actually be able to speak my mind. But I've been a long-time film...
And you must know Bill Pence.
I do know Bill Pence. I grew this beard in his honor, because I knew I was going to be here. But yeah, Bill's a close friend of mine, and probably the man who taught me the most I know about movies and how they're done.
Mr. Pence is very influential in the founding of the Telluride.
He is one of 3 founders of the Telluride Film Festival, and is the man who now, for years, has been programming the movies at the Music Hall, founder of the Telluride Film Festival, and I worked in his office at his elbow for 7 years. Also did a lot of house sitting and walking his dogs. So he's a good guy.
The other night after Reservoir Dogs is over, I was kind of floundering around here by my lonesome.
The storm kept me in Portsmouth.
We just kind of went over some of the trademark characteristics of Tarantino's film style. Mm-hmm. And if you might reflect a little bit on what you think some of them are, if you'd like. But the first thing that came to my mind the other night, and is most obvious about that work and this one, is the non-linear presentation. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's definitely a thing that he likes to do, and I think he started it with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. As I'm sure you know, he wrote this. Initially, it was 2 separate stories that he had in his pocket after he made Reservoir Dogs, which he made after he had sold the was it True Romance and that other one.
I know True Romance. I can't think of the other thing here.
Yeah, there was the other one that he gave away. So there's Natural Born Killers.
Okay.
He had sold both those screenplays by the time he got and had used that money to make Reservoir Dogs, or to get that into production. Used that to leverage. He got that into Harvey Keitel's hands. That brought him into Weinstein's wheelhouse. That got him enough money to make Reservoir Dogs, and then he's the wunderkind of Sundance at this point, and they said, okay, well, what are you going to do next? He's like, well, I got these 2 kind of half-written stories in my pocket. Him and his partner Roger Avery had been working on these things for a while. Actually, they had 4 or 5 of them, but these 2 that he had meant very specifically to kind of go together as a first part, second part. And he went to Amsterdam and decided, I'm just going to grow this thing into 3 acts, into 3 stories that could be told as an anthology by 3 separate directors. And he finished off that 3rd piece, bought the first 2 pieces off of Roger Avery, so he could have the written and directed by Tarantino on the cover. And this is what he brought to Bob Weinstein. He said, I got these 3 stories. Weinstein's like, oh, that's terrific, but we want one movie. And 3 directors, that's, you know, that's hard to credit, that's hard to pay for. He's like, you just do it. Here's $4 million. Run. And so he sat down with actually the woman who later became his editor to just rejigger these 3 stories. And he'd initially meant them very much to weave in between each other, but they were going to be much more distinct than they became. It was going to be, you know, the 1, 2, 3 with secondary characters that would then become primary characters in the next one, tertiary characters over here that would like drift in and out in the background, so you would see the action happening in the background, very much like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. You know, that was exactly the kind of thing he was aiming for. But Weinstein was like, oh God, how dull is that? Can't we just make one movie out of this thing? And he tore it all apart, and he put it back together so the scenes would build into a showdown. And he just aimed the whole thing at that showdown and just took the timeline apart and put it back together again based on mood, added music, and then had a script for Pulp Fiction that he then shot. So yeah, that's the thing he does, is he plays with timelines. And I don't think it's always something that he does on purpose, but he does it, you know, he does it because he writes his scenes individually, but he wants the whole movie to build up into, you know, into an arc that leads to that showdown. And sometimes the way, you know, he writes scenes where the showdown really should be happening in the middle of the story, but he's not gonna put a showdown in the middle of the story. He's gonna put it at the end. So he just moves things around until it leads up to that Mexican standoff every time.
Well, it's a process that has been copied by others, and I'm not too sure how successfully, and or maybe critics have seen through the idea that they are copying Tarantino's style, and kind of chide the directors for not being creative enough to do something on their own and not just follow his lead and create something similar.
Well, you know, you can't always just get lightning and put it back in the bottle like that. And one of Tarantino's things is that he just rolls the dice. You know, he random things will, you know, he'll grab random things that are happening to him at that time and just throw them into the mix to see if they stick. And that kind of serendipity, and he's able to, I swear, he just generates this out of thin air. You know, Honey Bunny, that's a riot. You know, like that woman's named Honey Bunny with a gun, but that's because the woman who, you know, who later became his editor had invited him to house sit and take care of her pet rabbit. He refused to house sit, take care of her rabbit that was named Honey Bunny, who then died, and he felt bad. So he named a character Honey Bunny. It had almost nothing to do with really being creative, other than it was a thing that was happening, and he recognized that that's kind of hilarious. And so he just jammed it in there, and it becomes a thing. And he's really good at just, well, he's a recycler. He sees something, he likes something, and he just owns it. And he makes it his own, and then, because he's a filmmaker, he makes it all of our own. And there's a kind of, well, there's a balance of idiocy and genius there, you know, where he apes the things that he sees, but he is always looking, and he's always collecting. Like, I don't think he's forgotten a thing in his life. He just takes everything that he sees, and he rejiggers it into a thing that we now are experiencing life the way he sees it. And that's really difficult for, you know, some other guy who was not born with this talent to try to just, give it that Tarantino spirit. Like, you gotta really be Tarantino to give it the true Tarantino spirit.
But it was well thought enough to warrant the attempt to copy.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also just because Weinstein has so many people in his stable, you know, he's got Robert Rodriguez sitting right here, He's like, you, go make us some gangster pictures. That seems to be big now. And you know, what he turns out he's bringing Tarantino in to direct scenes for him in the middle of these things, just because nobody can do it like Tarantino.
Yeah. Well, and he certainly caught the eye of the talent in Hollywood as far as the actors are concerned. He and he and Woody Allen in kind of the same cubicle. That everybody wants to work with them, and they're willing to take the chance that what Allen and Tarantino are going to have them do is going to be good for their careers. John Travolta is a perfect example of somebody who, at that moment or thereabouts in 1994, was probably not on everybody's list of let's go hire John Travolta. John Travolta was doing these things with Kirstie Alley. That
he was doing like the Talking Baby movies.
Yeah, pretty funky, and not really what you'd want to put high on your resume. But after this, all of a sudden, Travolta became back. Well, what would it have been like in the late '70s when he was Saturday Night Fever and Grease.
And it's funny because Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein is rarely wrong about these things, but he fought against Travolta. Really, really did. That was like the one thing that he's like, oh, hire anybody you need, get the right people for the right job, but just not Travolta. And that was the one that Tarantino really had to fight for, that he knew that that's who he wanted. He knew he wanted Sam Jackson for Jules. Wrote the role for Samuel Jackson. It almost went to the guy. Do you remember English Bob? Goes by Paul. My name's Paul. This is all about you all. Yeah. English Bob was almost Jules. Came that close because apparently his audition was really good. But then Sam Jackson finally, he was late for his audition. He shows up and realizes this other guy's about to get the job, and was so angry because he thought he was just in. He walks in with this drink and didn't have anything. He didn't know what to say, and just drank the whole thing. And Tarantino's like, "Well, that's hilarious, right there. We're putting that in the movie. You got to do that again." And so we get Jules drinking that big Kahuna cup. So knowing exactly who he wanted was a thing that Tarantino, that's one thing that he's really good at. He knows how to make compromises. There's so many other people that could have been these characters, but Travolta was the one. He's like, it has to be this guy. And he does have that thing where, I saw that guy, I want to work with that guy. He would be great right here. And it doesn't even have to be a guy. Sometimes it's a piece of music. Sometimes it's an old cartoon. Sometimes it's a car that you're like, oh, I see that car. Sometimes it's a coat. I like that coat. That coat has to be here. And he puts it there, and it turns out it's exactly where it belongs. And that's exactly what he did with Travolta. That is the guy. We need that coolness. We need that suave. And a little bit on the seed. Is that right? That's exactly what he needed, and that's what he put in there, and it really, really worked, and blew everybody away.
Yeah. And he was probably influential in other actors' careers in subsequent movies. I think of Jackie Brown, and I think of Pam Grier and Robert Forster. Their careers are probably, they had kind of gone by a little bit. But yet he has memories of them in films that he had watched years before, or they appeared in years before, and said, I've got to bring these folks back into the fold here.
Yeah, and he keeps doing it well, and with Christoph Waltz recently,
perfect example also.
Just like, that's the guy, like that's the diamond I need on this thing, and at this point,
prior to Waltz's appearance in Tarantino's movie, he was not a known commodity here at all.
Yeah, people didn't understand.
A big deal on the continent, but over here, a zero.
And that's something that being, in charge of the Cannes Film Festival for 1 year will get you that kind of contacts. Where you just be like, oh, I know you, you know him, they know them, like, I want that guy. And all he has to do is shout it out into a room, and they come, and then they're in front of his cameras. It's amazing. He's one of those success stories that, you know, are so few and far between in Hollywood. You know, the little guy that never studied, you know, how to make a film, but knew what he wanted and was given all the toys and all the mechanics to make them run. You know, he's got, well, unfortunately she's passed away, but, you know, Sally Menke, his editor, the cinematographers that he works with, you know, I don't know if you've read about his style, and, you know, he doesn't know how to point to work a camera. He's like, I want it grainy, you know, like Blowout. You know, okay, well, we know, you know, his staff knows exactly what film grain at what speed they were filming that movie, and they get that. You know, they achieve that look for him, and, you know, he just quotes out things that he's seen, and he hasn't surrounded himself. Harvey Weinstein surrounded him with a team that could do anything he calls out. You know, so he's like, I want this to seem confusing. You know, like they did in that De Palma picture. And the next thing you know, Jackie Brown is having a 360-degree sweep around her, exactly like De Palma did.
Yeah. Eastwood has a repertoire of people that he keeps using. Mm-hmm. And it's been said that he does this because he doesn't have to explain what he wants. Yep. It pretty much is a case of, you guys know what I'm looking for. You know, we're going to set this up. We're going to shoot it this way. And
Bergman did it, and Woody Allen did it.
It happens, and it happens so that you can cut into the time that it takes to make a film, and also the amount of money that it takes to make a movie.
Yep,
because you don't have to spend a lot of time fooling around with people who are trying to figure out what the hell you want.
Yeah, they already know the shorthand.
Yes, sir.
You know, they do it like you did it that one time.
Yeah, I know. I'll ask a similar question as to what I did the other night, because there's a few different faces than were here the other night. What brought you here tonight? How many people had seen this before you got here?
I see one.
Why did you want to come back to see it again? I asked this the other night. I got some kind of interesting answers. Anybody want to vocalize why?
It's a great movie.
Okay.
A lot of good dialogue. I wish I could see it again though first.
Yeah. How many times have you seen it?
I'm sorry?
How many times have you seen this?
I couldn't count.
But it's numerous.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You can count.
I can count. I could not estimate.
It's the type of movie, if you come across it on TV or cable, you'll start watching it, even, you know, you've seen it several times, but you'll just start watching it and sort of get caught up and, you know, try to remember, oh, yeah, we're at this point now, and you sort of can't help.
Which point is this?
Yeah, just getting into it, even though maybe you weren't planning to sit and watch a movie.
Well, that
or
was brought up the other night.
So it's good to watch it from beginning to end.
You remember basically what the scenario is, but sometimes you don't remember exactly when the pieces fell.
Yeah.
And that's intriguing, because when you sit down to watch it again, you're, oh, gee, yeah, now I remember how this developed. That's the uniqueness that it offers.
And this one particularly, I think this one he goes nuts with it more than anywhere else, where he's got the three main stories, and then the subsequent stories under those, like, and all cut into 3 or 4 parts a piece that have been moved around. But again, it builds and builds and builds and comes back to itself, you know, which is very satisfying. You know, is to have it rope right back to that first step is very, very smart. And I get a question here, because this is the first time I've watched this movie a few times. who keyed Vincent's car?
I read it on IMDb though, so I was
Not
like,
fair.
I know I shouldn't say.
Because I think I figured it out, but what did they say?
They said it was Butch.
I totally think it's Butch.
Yeah.
It is much. I bought the 20th anniversary Pulp Fiction, and it's got the director, Tarantino, in the comments. And he explained that was one of the scenes that was cut out.
Because I had just the look that they gave each other, and it was one of those things that it really, really looked like there's going to be some resolution to this. And then I was seeing, I saw, thinking maybe the resolution to this is the Butch shooting Vincent later on, like way down the pike. But like that look wasn't big enough to lead to that as an endpoint. It was like there had to be something missing in there. And then I saw, realizing that, okay, here the morning happened, the meeting with Butch happened that same morning. They walk in with and the visual cues are all there. They've got the dorky shirts on. They walk in, they see Butch. He's sitting there pissed because he just blew off Marvin's head. He's had a terrible morning, and he sees Palooka here giving him the hairy eyeball, and like that moment that they have right there really needed to go somewhere. Next time you see Vincent, he's talking about having his car keyed. Like, it had to happen between those 2 points. I'm pretty so.
It would be great if it left it in.
I like the mystery. I like that there's a lot of mystery. They didn't tell us what's in the case. Of course, perfect way to deal with that case. I like that. I like that a lot of what Tarantino does invites speculation. Like again, just pulling out things that he sees, throwing them on the screen. Let's let somebody else figure it out.
We definitely saw Kiss Me Deadly then. The Robert Aldrich movie from 1955, because that's got the box in it.
There's
the box that glows.
And Repo Man that had the trunk that glows.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, I know you. Repo Man. So, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, do you pay any credence to the idea that basically all of Tarantino's films take place in a parallel universe type of situation where they're all connected?
I absolutely do.
I mean, considering Big Vega and Vincent Vega.
I think it's something that happened by accident at first, and when he realized he was doing it, he started really doing it. And on top of that, I think there are, the movies that he makes about the people that live in his universe, and then there are the movies that he makes that the people in that universe would watch, and they're not the same thing. So he will make, Kill Bill is a movie that Vincent Vega might have gone out to see earlier that day. But it's not a movie, it's not happening in the real world, it's being made in that world where they know that they're actually, the hyper-violence is, it would be, the hyper-violence in those movies is a reaction to the fact that in that world, they live in a world where Hitler was killed by a bunch of Jews in the movie theater. And give it, another 30 years for that to spread out. The fact that it happened in a movie theater, the fact that it happened at all, that Hitler didn't kill himself, that he was killed, has kind of desensitized people to that level of violence and also invited them into believing more and more in pop culture as references and as a way to communicate. And so it just makes that, it sets everything up to make all of his characters just like he is. So he can write all of these different characters that are very much like himself because he grew up in a world, on a screen in front of him, where really nasty things were being done to people, Like there were a lot of machine guns in his youth, and race cars, and rock and roll music, And so these are the things this is how he refers to the world, so he's written a bunch of characters that refer to the world in that way, and they would watch movies that even have to be a little bit harder core than that. And so we have like, From Dusk Till Dawn, which, that was Rodriguez, but he helped write it.
Yes.
But it still had the suits, and it had a lot of the Tarantino affectations, because that's the kind of movie that they would go see. Grindhouse movies are the kind of movie that these guys would see. And that, so yeah, I absolutely believe that he didn't start out to do that, but he loves the name Vega. And so when he couldn't get this guy to play the other guy, he just made another Vega. And so now they're brothers. Like, let's just say that. Let's just allow that to happen. And again, he allows for that kind of serendipity. He allows for those connections to be made, whether he's really trying to make them or not. And then there's the very deliberate ones where the red apple cigarettes show up everywhere. Big Kahuna Burger, everybody's eating Fruit Brute, even though it got discontinued in like 1978. It's like that cereal that everybody's eating Fruit Brute. It's just a thing that he liked when he was a kid, and so he puts it everywhere, and it becomes a part of his universe. I think it was Errol Morris once said about about making documentaries that he starts out with 5 arbitrary, unbreakable rules for any project that he gets into. Where he says, and this was in a very basic way, he'll say, if we're doing a documentary, our interviews will have the camera set here, with lights here, and they will be static. Or not. Maybe they'll move, but he'll pick. It'll be this far, it'll move, it'll be static, arbitrary, but he'll pick 5 of them. And then he will not deviate from that thing, and it will give whatever project he's working on a very distinct personality. And I think Tarantino has a version of that where I'm just going to arbitrarily make up a few brands that exist in this world. And he just litters them around in the background, and then that causes a personality to happen in all of his projects. And it's remarkably simple to do if you're willing to do it consistently. And every single movie that he's done has had a pack of red apple cigarettes in it. Every single movie he's done has had a reference to the line, "Let's get in character." There are just these unbreakable rules that he always puts into every single project that he works on, and that will cause, if not an intentional universe to form itself, like an associational one at very least. So yeah, I think so.
I'm curious to know, I was just thinking about this while you were talking. I'm curious to know, based on your knowledge of other Tarantino movies, if he chooses to keep gender roles the same as he does in this movie. I thought it was really interesting how Esmeralda, Honey Bunny, Mia, and what's her name? Bucks.
The French girl.
The French girl.
Philomena?
Fabienne. Right?
Fabienne.
So like all of them in this movie are watching or in some way consuming violence, but they're not participating in it. Like, Esmeralda's listening. Honey Bunny's watching the conversation between Jules and the guys. I don't remember his name, but she's not. She's watching it. She's not actually in the scene. I feel. And like with Fabienne, she's watching the motorcycle the explosions and stuff like that, and there's even a conversation between the two where she's like, I'm watching the violent stuff again, as if that's something that she does. I'm wondering if that's like a theme in Tarantino's.
That the women don't take part in the violence. Have you seen Kill Bill?
Kill Bill puts that to bed.
Oh yeah.
I think Jackie Brown is
I felt like that was kind of a theme in this movie, but
I think he was, honestly, I hadn't noticed it, and I think you're absolutely right. I think Tarantino had just not quite gotten his head around female power at that point, I think. And I would wager that somebody called him on it. And he was like, oh yeah, that's right. Pam Grier is one of my heroes. Why am I not writing stronger, more violent women? Like, why am I not writing the women as horrible as I am the men? And yeah, I think he had that gauze stripped off him a while ago. Was it Esmeralda, the cab driver, right? She actually, that exact character, same actress, which I say same actress, same character, same name, turned up in a short film about 4 years earlier that he saw about cleaning up crime scenes, corpses. She was one of those like mob workers that would go in and clean up. She was kind of the Winston Wolfe of this short film, which is funny that, you know, her name Lobos, and then Winston Wolfe, the cleaner, shows up. But she was exactly the same actress, same character that he had seen in a movie 3 years earlier. It was just like, and just put her in there.
Bruce Willis was also cleaning himself in the back of the cab.
That's true. It's true.
How do you explain, though, that all of these things that he does, I think he treads a very, very fine line between homage and plagiarism, you know, in a lot of his films, but we don't remember where the scenes or the characters originally came from. We remember them as Tarantino. Like the slow motion credit scene in Reservoir Dogs, that's from the original Ocean's 11. You know, Samuel L. Jackson's speech, and this movie is from some sort of, I think, is it South American serial? Or like a telenovela type thing with, you know, that another guy says the exact same speech, only in Spanish. And we don't remember that. No one remembers that.
Yeah,
Everyone remembers
nobody can catch
Tarantino.
all of his references. But, you know, if you're, you know, when you're dancing, you don't always catch all the DJ's references either. You just know it sounds good. And I think, you know, Tarantino was very much a, you know, he was on the cusp of that the sampling culture that we have all grown to embrace. And nobody had seen this before, where somebody would just be able to reach out and reference so many things so fast. And that's why I said earlier, I don't think he's ever forgotten a thing in his life, because the guy just, you know, he just unzips his head and it all spills out, like everything he's ever seen, and he's been looking really hard for a really long time. And yeah, he is perfectly happy to call out his references if he's called on them. If you ask him, he'll say, oh yeah, I was totally doing Ben well right there. This one that I was looking at, you know, this reminded me of, you know, the Kinski thing that he did with the, like, Jesus Christ.
I think all film directors do take from their predecessors to some degree, but not as much as Tarantino.
Yeah,
Like De Palma took the baby carriage from Eisenstein that was in The Untouchables, but Quentin Tarantino is like reference after reference after reference. It's more like a mashup than like using a sample.
Well, I mean, De Palma's one, though, who has received criticism for it, and saying that he's, you know, being a little
Hitchcock.
heavy-handed, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like Hitchcockian. I mean, some people feel that he like overdoes it, and he's just copying, but that's, you know, probably a discussion for another time, but he's one who's been called on it. And not always, people aren't always happy, but I think Tarantino gets away with it just because it's not from obvious sources, and I think he integrates them so well that it's not.
And I think that's exactly where his genius lies, is being able to integrate them so seamlessly that, you know, you don't even realize that you're watching, you know, Hitchcock and Eisenstein coming together in the same scene with 5 other directors.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how, you know, he'll mix dialogue from one guy, camera angles from another, music from an old cartoon, and like,
It doesn't have to be
It's only thing.
things that are famous that are being reproduced. The thing that comes to mind, at least this mind immediately, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a couple of sequences in that film shooting the gladiator, where the guy has got this humongous sword, and Indiana Jones is not gonna mess with this guy. He's just gonna take his gun out, he's gonna shoot him. Flashback about a half a dozen years, there's a William Smith movie called Seven. Exact same scene appears in that. Nobody saw that.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, what Brother Spielberg created in Indiana Jones is like, oh, isn't that cool? It was cool, but it was recycled also.
Yep.
And there's almost a shot-for-shot bit of business when you're in the desert, and there's airplanes, and he's driving a truck, and he's going under the truck.
Yeah, the stagecoach.
Well, it's almost a shot-for-shot from a Zorro serial.
Yeah, with the stagecoach.
Which these guys, Spielberg and
Lucas.
yeah, they watched all these things. Martin Scorsese's the same way. Watches a lot of film, and it was fascinating. Years ago, I had the good fortune to meet and talk to George Romero, and George Romero grew up in New York, and he used to go into a 16mm place, and he used to rent the Tales of Hoffman, of all things. Here's George Romero doing that. And he went in there one day, and he wanted to rent it, and it was out. Well, who's got it? A guy by the name of Martin Scorsese has rented that.
I think the other thing Scorsese, that you mentioned in Tarantino, what they do is they set extreme violence to incongruous music, which I think desensitizes you. You're like bobbing your head as they're blowing somebody's head off, wiping blood off the car. So it's intended to be jarring, but you almost become sucked into it and
you become complicit.
Yes.
Like I like this.
Mm-hmm.
This
Stylized
horrible
violence.
thing. For some reason I'm enjoying this. You're really not supposed to enjoy that stuff. And I think the differences between those two feelings are that frisson that is caused there is one of the things that makes Tarantino's movies jump out at people. I read Harvey Weinstein saying recently that he produced recently a documentary about gun violence in movies, and he said he was so moved by it that he's not going to produce any more violent movies. And yeah, that was my reaction to it. Really? Yeah, say it again, Harvey. That's the butter on his bread at this point.
Any other questions, folks?
I feel good.
Yes,
Mr. Dabrowski? Mr. Bartlett. The music. Does he pick the music before or
He does.
afterwards or?
Before, during, and after. He writes his.
It's all perfect,
He has pretty much a record store worth of vinyl
Yeah, very obscure.
off to the side of his bedroom. So he wakes up in the morning, walks in there, goes through, and he puts a record on. And he starts writing a script. And when he hits a point that he's like trying to find the mood, he will just start pawing through his collection, find things that suit the mood, and make notes in the margins of his drafts as he's going through, and give those to his script supervisors. They look at it, put the records on, and be like, "Oh, this might work a little better over here," and then once he gets it, he has these records playing on set around people, like, the dancing scene in this one, he was playing 3 or 4 different things at once to see which one sounded best to him, and then, he hit the one that they hit. Meanwhile, we're here, Travolta's teaching him how to dance. I would love to have been in that room. But yeah, between him, his script supervisor, his editors, and even their photographers, they all go through the scenes and they pick the things that they think would make that mood either better or completely opposite. And they squunch it all together. Sometimes they'll say, we want to echo the scene from here, we want that to be reflected over here, so they'll split a song in half and play one half here, one half there. So yeah, it's him. And it's funny, I really thought it was his editor who was doing this, because honestly, the Django Unchained is the first movie she hasn't edited for him because she passed away. And the music wasn't hitting quite
did.
as, you know, in the same way, and I thought for sure it was her who was pulling that music in the editing process. Yeah, but then I read interviews with her saying like, that guy brings records with him. You know, and, you know, by her own admission and a dozen other interviews that I read with everybody, that it's really him. That, you know, he drives it, he asks for opinions, he takes feedback, and at the end of the movie you have something that is really, because he started it, completely his.
Do you have any thoughts on why the genre had such a weird name? Like, have you ever found that has any significance? It's like,
Actually, that's a good question.
it's like three names. I don't remember the
Jack
Oh,
Rabbit.
Jack Rabbit Slim.
Jack Rabbit.
Oh, Jack Rabbit Slims?
Maybe that's less weird than I thought. I thought it was. I'm sorry. I guess I thought it was.
I think that's
actual
just
names.
Yeah, that's just a thing he liked.
Yeah.
Same with Big Kahuna Burger, he thinks it sounds good. You know, so he just throws it on everything. Did you notice when Butch was going in to get his watch off the kangaroo, you could hear an ad, I just noticed it today too, you could hear an ad for Jack Rabbit Slims coming out of one of the windows as he walks by.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Which again is Tarantino like, I'm gonna make a universe. You know, I got a thing and I think it's funny. Let's just put it everywhere.
Could also be the Honey Bunny from the Jack Rabbit. If the
Oh,
Rabbit
yeah.
Slims.
Do you foresee this universe crumbling that Mr. Tarantino has created?
He's gonna have to, well, now that he's done it, you know, as he's making it more and more complex, it's gonna get harder and harder to maintain it. I've heard him say that he's got maybe 10 years left in him,
Yeah, that's when he was 60, he was gonna retire.
and, you know, and that would be, you know, at his current rate, that's 2 more movies, so I bet he could maintain it for 2 more movies. But if he decides, like, let's try to do 5 more movies in the next 10 years, I don't think he could handle it, but I don't think he would break his run. I honestly think in that he already just jumped off board a movie because his script leaked. You know, he's going to maintain his own legacy as that thing that, with the exception of Death Proof, never failed. You know, like he's not gonna go out on a soft spot. He's gonna go out swinging. So I think he's going to make 2 more very comprehensively complex films that fit completely within the universe that he's already created. And along the way, he's probably going to hire Robert Rodriguez to make a couple more movies that those guys would go watch.
So we don't know what he's working on now, or?
He was working on a flat-out Western that he was going to do in 70mm, which was actually something he's never done before and would have been really great to see that big, epic vista. But he gave the first draft of the script to 6 people, and one of those 6 people, he doesn't know who, leaked it online. And he said he didn't want anybody to see that first draft and have that to compare to, like, not till he was dead. You know, wanted them to see the movie and judge it on its own merits without having to see the, you know, he didn't want people to know how the sausage was made. And after that leak, which happened, I think it was just a week ago, he announced that he might publish it as a book because it's a story that he's been working on for a couple of years now. But he's like, I'm not going to make that movie. So I mean, that's, you know, his level of forgive me for using the word integrity in the same sentence as Quentin Tarantino, but his level of integrity is such that he just will not compromise. He wants 100 years from now for people to be speaking his name in the same sentence as Bergman and John Hughes. And he's not going to screw it up if he can manage to avoid it. He's got a lot of people working for him that will keep him from screwing it up.
What you said about his name being mentioned in the same breath as Bergman and John Hughes. Actually, I read about Scorsese. I laughed so hard. It was beautiful. In 1973, when Mean Streets came out, Roger Ebert wrote in his review that he could see Scorsese becoming the next Fellini within 10
Wow.
years, and no one saw it, no one said that. And then they met a few weeks after the review came out, and Scorsese said, I saw what you wrote, and I thank you, I really appreciate it, but I want to ask you, do you really think it'll take 10 years? And like, he was completely serious, and so, I could see Tarantino doing that.
I would say Tarantino is not, he didn't invent brain surgery, he's just the best brain surgeon out there right now.
That's a good way to say it.
Well, you can get some sage advice from people that have had experience, that have perhaps had the ability to see things a little clearer because you're maybe not in the thick of it, as far as you're off on the sidelines watching progression and not part of that progression. You're not the person who's doing it, you're the person who's observing. And you might be able to, I've always felt that some of the best movies about this country have been made by people who don't live in this country.
12 Years a Slave.
And, it's sometimes, when this place was being considered, when this movie theater was being considered as an entity, we went to a lawyer who we said, well, we've got to get from point A to, we want to go beyond point B. We want to get down to like maybe F or G. How do we do this? Because we want to have this happen. And he says, this is going to take maybe about 3 years before you're going to be able to do this. And I think everybody at that time listened and said, that's too long. I don't think we can sustain 3 years in order to get this movie theater built. And it's just about what it took from the moment that man passed. He had worked on the Capitol Center for the Arts and how it evolved from a movie theater that was kind of crumbling to what it's turned into, a place where you can see some pretty neat live attractions. So he had a yardstick that he was applying to what we were trying to do, and the yardstick when people tell you things, you can filter out what you want to hear and maybe what you don't want to hear. But sometimes you can't dismiss things that, depending on the source, just might hit the nail right on the head. Anyway.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks? I appreciate you, again, quite a few faces came back again tonight, and I like that. It makes me feel like we're maybe doing something right here, maybe. And we're going to continue to do it. Next month is going to be John Hughes. The month after, there's a big question mark. And then January, February, March, we're going to delve into the marvelous world of a guy by the name of Mel Brooks, which I hope will provide what, not that there isn't humor involved in Mr. Tarantino's work, but it's a little more obvious
Different kind of humor.
in Mr. Brooks' work.
Do you know which films you're going to do?
I'm going to do The Producers and Blazing Saddles,
Nice.
which I think should be good. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.